Well, hello, writers. Welcome to episode number 123 of How Do You Write? I'm Rachael Herron, and I'm so glad you're here. Today we are talking to the lovely Dr. Tricia Bruce, and she is talking about what you need and what you might not need to do your writing. I had a really lovely time talking to her. I found her spirit and energy very inspiring, and I know that you will too. I am going to keep this intro so short. It has been a week. If you watch on the video, you can probably tell my eyes are drooping. It's almost 10 at night, and given that I usually go to bed at 9, I am sleepy. So just a quick update. I wrote my Patreon essay and for once got it out a day ahead of time. That was pretty great. I'm writing about money, and in this last essay, I explored my greatest shame in my life. Something that was money related, and just getting it into the essay and out in the world made me feel amazing. It really demonstrated to me again the power of the written word. I'm not even going to tell you what it is. If you really want to know, you can pay $1 and go read it on Patreon. I really think it takes the essay to explain the whole thing, but it really, at the very end of the essay, when I was done writing, I realized what my biggest block about money is and how and why I feel guilty when I spend money. It was pretty incredible. So I'm very pleased with that. That feels really good to get out of the way. I just finished an edit of a manuscript. I do not usually edit anymore. I just don't have time. But I just finished editing an amazing memoir manuscript of a story that really needs to be told and needs to be heard. And it is so beautiful. And that was one of the many things I was doing for the last couple weeks. It is so gorgeous. And I literally just turned the last page a few minutes ago. And I'm still in the book. I'm sure I will be dreaming the book tonight. So I was honored and happy to do that. And I think tomorrow I've got a bunch more stuff to do, but those were my big things this week to complete, and they're complete, and that's awesome. Oh, tomorrow is a big thing starting. 90 Days to Done. My masterclass is starting tomorrow. And I could not be more excited. I put together a 30-minute video for them today, a welcome video. I thought it was going to be like a nice little 5-minute video, but no, I'm very excited about taking 12 people through novel writing from the beginning to the end. And I'm also going to be writing a novel at the same time they are. This is my class that I offer at Berkeley, but really on steroids because we do not write a whole book in the Berkeley class. So I'll keep you posted on how that's going. I'm super stoked to see what we can do together. And that's my catch up. I would like to thank new patrons, Kristen Hilberg. Thank you, Kristen. Gavin Collinson. Thank you, Gavin, so much for being a new patron. Barbara Edelman. She is at the level which gets 30 minutes of coaching with me a month. And I've worked with Barbara before, and she's rad. And I love talking to her about her book. So life is sweet, y'all. This is some good stuff. And what else is going to be really good is my bed in about 6.5 minutes. So I wish you happy writing. Please get some done. No one can write what you can write. You are the only person who can do that. I'm going to keep telling you that because sometimes we all forget. But we really are put here for a purpose. And if part of your purpose is to write, you know it, you feel it in your heart. So get it done, please. Make me happy, make yourself happy. Do some writing and tell me about it. We will talk soon. Enjoy the interview. Well, I could not be more pleased today to welcome to the show Tricia Bruce. Hi, Tricia.
Hi, thanks for having me.
It's so nice to have you. Let me give you a little introduction. Tricia Bruce, Ph.D., is an accomplished sociologist of religion and award-winning author. Her work intersects the sociological and cultural implications of religion, social change, organizations, social movements, immigration, and race. Dr. Bruce is a regular television and radio commentator on a wide variety of contemporary sociological topics, including religion, Catholicism, social trends, family, gender, and more. It's so cool to have you on the show. I do a lot with fiction writers
Yes.
and not so much with nonfiction. But I'm also a nonfiction writer as well as fiction. So this is going to be great.
Yeah.
But you are kind of an expert in process, which is what this podcast is all about, and how people get their work done. How they get their writing from their brains onto the page. But I would love it if you told us about your writing process and how you work.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think as a sociologist, one thing that we go in with right away is thinking through, okay, we have these really big ideas and they're tied to research, right? So one of the big pieces of the process is having to do all the research. But then oftentimes we can just get overwhelmed. I'm someone who draws on a lot of qualitative data, so interview-based data, field research, and we might have all of this really rich data with a story to tell about society, right, about the world around us, and yet we want to get it out there. And so for me, I bring that same systematic approach that I use in my research to my writing. So I think through, okay, where do I want to go? What is my vision for this? And one of the things that I do super early in my process for my books is write out the table of contents, and you're thinking, okay.
Wow. How much does that change as you go through? I can't even imagine writing the TOC first.
Yeah.
Is it really a guideline that you stick to?
I definitely change a little bit along the way, but the way that emerges is again so for example, with my interviews, I'll qualitatively code all of the interviews. So it's almost like hashtagging them. So you're kind of identifying themes that are in there. And so I've already coded all the interviews. And then from that, I group the codes into meaningful groups.
Wow.
And those essentially become the chapter titles. And so when I move, through the writing process, I'm essentially bringing those groups of the data into each of the chapters. So I have a little Excel file for each of my books that starts to outline, okay, what are my codes? What are the meaningful groups? How do they hang together? And then what would that chapter be? What is that theme? And then that becomes my roadmap for the rest of the way.
I'm so fascinated by this because this is something I've never done or heard of. So when you qualitatively code this, what does it actually look like on the page? Are you dealing with Word documents that you're taking the interviews from and then, putting them at the top like hashtags, or are there other ways?
Yeah, so I actually spent all of today coding. So it's very much fresh in my mind with some data that I'm working with for a book. But, there are different ways to do it. The old school paper way would be to print out all of your interview transcriptions or your field data. And then as you go through on the margins, literally you can write, okay, what are the themes? If someone's talking about family, then you might write family. And then every time family comes up in different interviews, then you would have that tag again. The way that I do it and that a lot of sociologists do it now is using computer-assisted qualitative data analysis. So I use a program called Atlas TI, and it really smooths out the process because then I can identify each of the transcripts that I've uploaded by various characteristics, whether it's, this is from a man that's 55 and white and lives in New York or something, and then match them each that way. And then again, I just go through systematically reading them, and then you can actually block a text or select a block text and then put whatever code it is you want to in there. And you can later combine codes or see how codes interrelate. But these programs will allow you to basically pull out then all of the blocks that you have marked with a given code. So it'll populate a document. It's usually pretty long. And then you read, so if you're coding something like family, to use that example, then you print that report and you can look, okay, here's what all of my 60 interviewees said about family.
Oh my gosh. I want that for my life. It's like a metadata technological Post-it situation.
Yes. And it really helps with writing. And I mean, writing is difficult in so many ways, and you're not someone I have to tell that to or any of your audience. So there's so much to it. And yet this process to me kind of breaks it down to make the writing feel like it's a way for me to tell this story. And so it's so much less intimidating than a blank page.
And we only have these tools now, and people have always done it the old way. You must be so grateful for this program.
Right. Yes, it is a wonderful program.
That's amazing. So how do you order your life in terms of getting your writing done and doing the rest of your life, fitting all that in?
Yes, right. Well, this is always a challenge, right? And I'm someone who, for 12 years worked at a small teaching intensive liberal arts institution. So the expectation is that you're, teaching and doing service and advising all the time, and the writing tends to be, often the last thing. And yet, it is the way we as researchers, me as a sociologist, tries to get those ideas out there. So it means a lot of creativity, right? And
Mm-hmm.
I also have a couple kids at home, and juggling a bunch of different projects. And so for me, I tend to break my writing down into pretty small chunks. I use the Pomodoro technique.
Nice.
I tend to time everything. And since I do have various projects that I'm working on, then I organize my poems by project. And I'm pretty intentional too about I think I almost write in reverse in the sense of, okay, if I want to finish this article or this book by this date, then, and this is my starting point, then you kind of back up and think, what is it going to take? And so I break it down really starting with a year and then months and then weeks. And then once you have that vision or that goal of where you're going, then it becomes more a matter of division at that point. Okay, what do I have to do to get to this point? And so I'm also pretty outcome based. So I make sure that I'm not just spinning my wheels. I want to show, okay, I have word count, or I've sent this thing out, or I've conducted this interview on this day towards this project.
There's something so reassuring to me about all the math that is involved in writing and drafting. I
Yeah.
do a lot of math. I say this in one of my books that there's just you have no idea how many times you can divide a time frame into the number of words that you need, and then when you get a migraine and you're out for a day, you're doing the math in your head. You're rejiggering everything.
Absolutely. Well, and I think it's so much easier to say, okay, I can find 25 minutes to write,
Yes,
or even 10 minutes.
yes.
I can write for a small period of time, because otherwise we're constantly saying, well, I need a full day, or I need a full week. And believe me, I love those too. I take a writing retreat each year, but that's not normal life. And so when you can carve it down into those small pieces, and then just the practice of it, you start to realize, oh, this works, and it's less intimidating the next day to dive back into it, because you're just devoting, okay, let's do 25 minutes or another 25 minutes.
I always find my first one is the hardest, and then after that, the rest of the day, as they feed in, that's fine. But
Exactly.
the first one is always breaking the seal. So what is your biggest challenge when it comes to writing?
Yeah. As a sociologist and as a researcher, I have to get the story right. And
Yeah.
so and you're someone who writes nonfiction too. There's a bar in terms of, we've got to get it right. And in my field, there's of course a culture of peer review, and so this is read by other experts in the field. So to me, I'm very careful about doing the research right, doing the data analysis right, trying to get the story right. I know that there's subjectivity therein, and positionality in terms of what I bring to it and what I see versus what someone else might see. But I do want to be able to do my best job with, representing what I'm learning. And then I think the other big challenge I have too probably would just be impatience.
Yeah.
These things take so long. I do occasionally do some work that's more journalistic in orientation, and I'm kind of amazed because the turnaround is so quick. There's a story out, and we want to understand the sociological perspective on it right now.
And that could be published within 4 days after you turn it in. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or I'm like driving to the TV studio a half hour later.
Oh
And
boy,
so, literally, I mean, this is what usually happens. And so, which is great, because then I feel like, okay, all this research that I just have at the ready, and I can use that. But for my books and my bigger projects that really matter to me, it takes a long time, and you have to be committed to it, and then recognize, okay, this is a long-term game. And it's, each of these palms is getting you closer to it. It's like the sage writing device we hear about, it's like driving in the night with your headlights. You can only see as far as the headlights, but you
you can get the
eventually
whole
get there.
way. For people
Yeah.
who might not know what Palms or Pomodoros are, we've talked about them before, but it's an app, and it's a way of dividing up your time. You work 25 minutes with a timer, and then you take a 5-minute break, or a 15-minute break if you need a longer one. So, and they're wonderful. So what is your biggest joy when it comes to writing?
Mm. You know, I do this work, and I write because I love it. I just something just that really awakens me inside, just in terms of the actual process. But I write the stuff that I write because I feel like, and I hope that it will matter in the world in terms of our, whether it's our self-conception or the ways that we think about inequality or injustice. And so to me, I get really excited when I hold my stuff in for a long time, and then at some point you release it to the world, right? And there's this moment of panic or fear, but then there's a moment of hope too. Like, okay, not only does this feel good because I finished something and it's out there, but maybe it'll change. Maybe it will help people to think through, how do we live together? How do we build a world that is more equitable or happy or peaceful? And so, that's a hard joy to hold on to all the time, because usually I'm just in the midst of the actual writing. Right. But I know that that's possible, right? And I know that that's what I'm working towards, and I do see that through some of the work that I do too.
It's a gift that we have as writers that I don't think we think about as often as we should, that we have the potential to change the world in a very real, direct way, more than, our friends who change the world in different ways. We get to do it through this particular medium that we love so much, and I really appreciate that you said that. Can you share a craft tip of any sort?
Sure. Yeah, I think a couple of things that I think about. One, again, and I know folks on your podcast have shared similar thoughts in terms of, how do you stop in a way that allows you to start again?
Yes.
It's funny because I had a friend who was over for dinner a couple weeks ago, and he shared that his reverse shifter didn't work. Like he could not shift into reverse; he could only go forward. And so, thankfully, park still works, so he could park and he could drive. And I said, "How can you even drive? Like, I can't believe you're still driving this car." And he's like, "No, he's an economist. He's like, no, my car's fine." He said, "I just have to pay attention to where I park. You always have to park."
I love this analogy.
And in a way, so that then whenever he kicks it into drive, he needs to make sure he can go. Otherwise, he's going to be pushing his car, right? So I know we had a good laugh about this, and I think he might need a new car. But it did help me, because I was thinking, you know what, that's so smart, because you literally want to park on a downhill slope. You want to just be ready so that you can get into drive again. And I need my creature comforts too. Like I get that there are things that are really useful. For me, it's a vanilla latte. I need my vanilla latte. In fact, I usually plan my writing retreats around density of coffee houses in an area.
That's very smart.
Yes. So, I think you recognize in yourself, okay, what do I need? And it's fair to have some of those. Hopefully the list isn't too long, but have a few things, and then feel like, okay. And then you're ready to go. You're ready to start driving as soon as you hit the ground running again.
I'm gonna concentrate on parking on a downhill slope from now on in my life. I just love that so much. Okay, so when you are with other writing friends, what is the thing in writing that you always come back to? The thing that you want to talk most about? For me, it's process, which is why I have this show. But what is it for you?
Yeah, this is a great question. And also it says something too about how isolated we often are as writers.
Yeah.
I think sometimes, for me, not only on the writing side, but also in my particular specialty area. So there, I don't have folks who are thinking about sociology of religion as mostly what I write in. Yeah. And I don't have regular folks who are right next door or who are in the office across the hall that I can talk to about this. And so for us, when these conferences that we have are super important, and we all get together and really try to create a supportive environment. I think because there's such a culture of trying to get ahead in academia, and there's a lot of pressure around trying to get a small number of jobs that are not available for everyone, then trying to get tenure, then trying to get promoted. And because of that, I think it can be a cutthroat and competitive environment. And so I'm pretty intentional about being supportive, and then especially seeking out those younger scholars, whether it's graduate students or assistant professors, and saying, hey, you can do this, I support you. And also you can have a life, you can take the weekend off. You can have a baby, I think that we, both as writers, as scholars, as teachers, it's so much. And sometimes and there's so much critique that we hear from others that we critique ourselves, and we try to really just pour all of ourselves into it without giving enough back to ourselves, So for me, I think a lot of my intentionality there is okay, how do we support, how do we build each other up, and really make writing and academia as a whole a more friendly, supportive place.
Well, it sounds like you come from a background of having been mentored. Is that true? Because you look at these people and are mentoring. Is that something that you had when you were coming up?
Yeah, I definitely had folks who saw in me things before I saw them in myself. There was a nun when I was in my church when I was growing up who, I knew I kind of wanted to sing, but she said, "Here's a microphone and you have a solo this Sunday."
Oh.
And I think, those kinds of intimidating spaces where someone says, I know you don't have the confidence yet in yourself, but I have the confidence in you. And those kinds of moments, I think, really stuck with me. And so when I think about, how do we build each other up, it comes back to those kinds of messages. How do we recognize, hey, we all have weaknesses, but we also have strengths, and we can build confidence through our collective strength. So I try to do that a lot as well.
It's funny how those kinds of memories don't leave you either. I have very, very clear memories of the exact people who encouraged me in my writing career, from, my high school teacher to my favorite college professor to my favorite professor in grad school. And I never forget what they said to me on those moments that I thought, oh, I could, this is a dream that might happen. I could do this. That's awesome.
It makes such a difference in our trajectory. I totally agree.
And if we think about that, if we think about that one sentence from us, these are one sentence conversations that I remember, one sentence from you could change a life like that. That's wonderful. So what is the best book you've read recently, and why did you love it?
Well, in terms of my own reading, I read a ton of things. But book-wise, probably most of them fall into the category of either just random self-help stuff or sociology. So I won't share the self-help side.
Oh, I love the self-help side.
I do too. But I don't want to drop too many hints on what I'm reading on that front. So so on the sociology side, I think a lot of sociology books try to both, and some better than others, but try to be well written and also to convey an important message. And the one of the books that I read recently that I really enjoyed is one that's called, I actually have it with me, I pulled it from my shelf. It's called Palaces for the People. And it's by Eric Kleinenberg, and he's a sociologist who lives in New York. And he writes about social infrastructure, but basically places like libraries and schools and gatherings, and how that matters to build community and reduce polarization and help us help each other. And what I like about how he writes it is that he's very much a part of the story too. He tells a story, he's in the story. It gives voice to others who are in the city, and some of the pain points of our redevelopment, urban redevelopment. And I think he effectively does that in a very readable way.
Uh-oh, you froze.
Hits on the important note, it's worth reading.
That sounds
okay. A lot of sociology is important, but it's not as well written.
That's wonderful. Thank you for putting that on our list. And what would you like to tell us about yourself right now? Where can we find you? Tell us about your books. Tell us about any projects you're working on.
Sure. Yeah, I've got a few different projects in the works right now. My website is triciabruce.com, so TRICIA Bruce, BRUCE.com. I'm on Twitter at Tricia C. Bruce, so I'll update folks there too. But I have a few different projects I'm working on, one related to the adaptive reuse of churches. So what happens at churches when they're no longer used for religious purposes or worship purposes?
Fascinating.
Yeah, and I've actually done some interviews with folks around the globe on that one, so I'm pretty excited about that project.
So cool.
Yeah, and then co-writing a book on Asian American Catholics with a couple colleagues based on some research that was commissioned for the USCCB a couple years ago. And then I have a big new project on Americans' abortion attitudes. So that one will be, I think, interesting as well and difficult.
That makes you sound pretty fearless.
Yeah,
because
I hope so.
You're treading into very emotional, volatile waters, and as a sociologist, that must be such an interesting thing to do.
It is, but I think we can't shy away from the hard stuff, and I think sociology gives us tools to be able to navigate really difficult topics.
It has been so delightful talking to you.
Yeah, likewise. Enjoyed the conversation very much.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for being on the show, and we will keep an eye out on what you are doing in the future.
Great. Thanks so
Tricia.
much.
Bye-bye.